Hello, and welcome back to Nocturne Library. If this is where you come at the end of the day to wind down and drift off, thank you for letting me be part of that little nightly ritual. I'm Ava Calloway, and I'm really glad you're here tonight. We're settling into something especially cozy this evening, written by Nora Fielding. A snowbound reading room high in the Swiss Alps, where everything is about warming up slowly after a long day out in the cold. Tired legs, damp socks drying by the fire, a thick blanket pulled over you, hot chocolate warming your hands, and a book waiting in that soft amber light while snow hushes the windows outside. There's no rush in this one, and nowhere you need to get to. It's just that lovely in-between feeling of coming in from the cold and letting your whole body remember what comfort feels like, little by little. If you enjoy these quiet nights here, liking or subscribing does help Nocturne Library keep making more of them. So, get yourself comfortable, let your shoulders drop, and take one slow, easy breath. And now, let's step into the warm glow of the fire. Chapter 1. In from the evening snow. Cold still lives in your cheeks when you step inside. And for a moment, you feel both temperatures at once. The blue-white sting you have carried down from the slopes, and the heat reaches the front of your coat. The door eases shut behind you. At once, the storm is cut off, reduced to a muffled sound beyond the wood and glass. No longer on your face, no longer in your sleeves. You stand and let the warmth reach you. The heat is not sudden. It reaches you in layers. First across the front of your coat, then into your hands, then gradually through the wool at your shoulders. Your calves still carry the steady ache of skiing, that earned heaviness that remains after a long afternoon of turns and traverses. It sits low in the muscles, almost pleasant now that you are no longer asking anything of them. Your thighs feel used, your feet compressed from hours in boots, and your face still has that bright, tightened feeling that comes after wind and snow. The reading room of the Combe-style Grand Hotel above St. Moritz is dimmer than the corridor behind you. It takes a second for your eyes to settle. Dark walnut shelves rise along the walls, their ladder rails polished by decades of use. The sheen on the wood is deep and old, not glossy, just patiently kept. Between the shelves, the paneling carries a dull beeswax glow. Nothing shines too hard here. The light stays low, close to the lamps and the fire, and leaves the upper reaches of the room in a brown gold dimness. You draw one breath, then another. The room has its evening scent already. Resinous larch smoke comes first, dry and slightly sweet at the edges. Under it is beeswax on wood paneling, warm and faintly honeyed. Then damp wool slowly drying, the smell of cuffs, hems, scarves, and socks yielding back the day's weather. And somewhere within that, softer and rounder, cocoa rises with the steam from a cup you have not yet been handed, but can almost imagine all the same. The scents settle into one another. The room has smelled this way all winter, Ahead of you, the stone hearth gives off a broad, steady warmth. Not a blaze, not a showy fire, but a mature one, already established, with a bed of embers beneath the split wood. The iron grate is darkened from many seasons. Every so often, there is the dry little shift of a settling log. The sound reminds you the fire is still working, but not enough to pull your attention away from your own thaw. Near the hearth stands the green leather wingback chair. Even from here, you can see the shape of it. High back, curved wings, broad arms that will be slightly cool at first touch, and then, after a little while, warm beneath your forearms. It is set at the angle that makes sense in a room like this. Not square to the fire, not square to the shelves, but turned just enough for both. A chair for reading or staring into the fire. You take a few steps farther in, and the carpet gives under your weight with a muted thickness. It is a relief to feel floor instead of packed snow, to hear something softer than the scrape of edges and the crunch of evening ice underfoot. Your coat feels heavier now that you are no longer moving through weather. Melt has begun somewhere along the seams. The wool at your cuffs is no longer crisp with cold. One shoulder is warmer than the other, where the room's heat has reached it first. Behind you, where the entry gives way to the room, the windows are visible between shelves and lamps. The windows looking toward the Engadin snow. Evening flurries have dimmed the panes, so that the world beyond is reduced to pale movement and a deepening blue. Along the edges, a lace of condensation has begun to gather where indoor warmth meets the glass. It catches the light from the lamps in a faint silver border. Outside, the snow continues. Inside, you only know it by the softened view and the hush pressed against the panes. You are not in a hurry to cross the room. That is one of the first pleasures here. No one needs anything done quickly. You can stand long enough to feel your heartbeat slow from the walk in. You can notice the pressure lifting, little by little, from the fronts of your shins, where the boots have held them all afternoon. You can let your hands remain in your gloves for one more minute if you want the contrast to last. On a side table near the chair lies a neat stack of newspapers, aligned with a care that suggests an evening habit. Their edges are squared, though no one appears to be reading them. One corner has been squared with care. The poker rests parallel to the hearthstones. A pair of logs waits in the scuttle, with their cut faces turned the same way. Somewhere in the order of the room, there is a porter who prefers things straight before night fully settles in. Or someone else whose routine has shaped the room. You do not need to see him yet to feel the trace of that routine. The fire is kept. The papers are set right. A log will be added at dusk. The room has its own sequence, repeated so often that it has become almost part of the architecture. You begin to unbutton your coat. The first opening at the throat lets in a band of warmer air, and you feel it immediately against skin that has been hidden from the wind. The scarf loosens next. As you unwind it, the scarf still smells faintly of snow and cold air. Then that too starts to fade into larch smoke and beeswax. Your gloves come off one by one. The backs of your hands are colder than your palms. The fingers feel a little clumsy at first, thick from the cold, then more responsive with each second indoors. The room remains nearly still around you. No one crosses in front of the fire. No voices rise from nearby armchairs. Somewhere much farther off, from another part of the hotel, there may be a door closing, or the smallest touch of crockery. But the reading room keeps those sounds at a distance. The low combustion of wood, the faint shift of your coat fabric, the small click of a button freed from its hole. You drape the scarf over one forearm and look again toward the hearth. It is easy to imagine the next movements without needing to make them yet. The pair of Solomon's ski boots left on a ribbed Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand, their buckles unclasped, the liners releasing the last trapped cold, then the chair taking your weight. After that, the old hardback in your lap, cloth-bound spine, deckled pages, that paper smell of dust, vanilla, and dry winter air, opening with the slight resistance of a book often reread in weather like this. The thought of these things does not hurry you. It only lets the body release another notch of effort. You shrug one shoulder, then the other, and let the coat slide loose. The lining parts from your sleeves with a soft drag of fabric over wool. The garment is heavier in your hands than it felt while you were wearing it, dampened a little at the hem from snow shaken off too late. You rest it over the back of a nearby chair for the moment, and your own shape feels smaller, simpler, more indoor at once. The fire reaches you more clearly now. There is warmth at the fronts of your knees, though you are still standing. Your face begins to lose its sharpened outdoor feeling. A trace of tingling remains in the cheeks, but the skin around your mouth softens. You become aware of how much cold you are carrying, not as discomfort exactly, but as tension. Jaw set against wind, shoulders lifted against weather, hands closing around poles and straps and door handles. Indoors, each of those efforts can stop, one by one. You move farther in. The walnut shelves stand close and dark beside you as you pass. A few spines catch the lamp glow. Faded cloth, gilt nearly gone. Titles too worn to insist on being read from across the room. The ladder rail runs along at hand height, smooth enough that your fingers could slide along it if you wanted. It has the polished feel of use repeated over many winters. There is comfort in objects that have been touched often and not replaced. At the windows, the flurries thicken for a moment, enough to blur the outer lamps into pale halos. Condensation gathers more firmly at one lower corner of the glass. A bead forms, hesitates, then lengthens. You notice it only because the room has already begun to slow your attention to that scale. Near the hearth, the leather chair darkens on one side where the firelight reaches it. The other side remains a deeper green, almost black in the room's dimness. The seam along one arm has a slight shine from use. You can picture your forearms there, your shoulders dropping, your breathing changing once your back no longer has to keep itself braced against cold air and motion. For a moment, you remain standing beside the chair instead of taking it. The mountain is still present in the body, but no longer in command of it. Your legs remember the slope. Your cheeks remember the wind. Your boots still contain some fragment of the outside in their rigid shape and trapped chill. But here, in the reading room, those things are already beginning to lose definition. Heat is doing its patient work. The storm has been reduced to a muted sound beyond the door and the windows. The scent of drying wool has joined the room's older smells. The fire keeps warming the cold out of you. On the hearth, a piece of larch shifts and settles inward with a dry, tidy sound. A small breath of resin reaches the air. You rest your fingertips on the arm of the green leather chair. As expected, it is cool at first touch. Not cold, just carrying less heat than your hand. The leather is smooth, firm over the padding beneath, and faintly creased where others have sat through other evenings, while snow crossed the windows and the newspapers remained unread. Your hand stays there a moment longer. Behind the glass, evening snow goes on falling over the Engadin. At your back, the shut door keeps the weather where it belongs. In front of you, the fire gives off its measured heat. And here, with your coat off and your scarf loosened, and the first thaw moving through your hands and face, you stand at the edge of the chair and feel the room growing warmer around you. Chapter 2. Boots on the Coir Mat. You stay standing for a moment after the door has shut, and the storm has thinned to a muffled rush beyond the walls. The first warmth has reached your face and hands already, but lower down, the cold still sits in your shins and ankles, in the stiff shape your feet still hold inside the boots. Your calves carry that earned, pleasant heaviness from the day's skiing, and your feet feel at once tired and overawake, as though they have not yet understood that the last run is done. Near the threshold, the ribbed Coir Mat lies darkened in places by old melt and fresh snow shaken loose from hems and soles. Beside it, the brass umbrella stand gives off a dull glow from the firelight, not polished to brightness, but worn to a steadier shine by many winters. You make your way there with the careful, abbreviated steps ski boots require indoors. Each step more a shift of weight than a stride. The room has already loosened your shoulders and throat, but your feet are still held in their hard shells, still on the mountain in their own way. When you stop on the mat, the core presses up through the boot soles in a rough, fibrous pattern, a faint reminder of ground after the packed snow and carved tracks of the afternoon. You look down at the pair of Solomon's ski boots, and for a moment, they still feel like part of you. White flecks thawing on the plastic, buckles dulled by cold, seams beginning to darken as the first melt works in. All day they held your ankles firm through turns and traverses, carried you through lift lines and over scraped patches of evening snow. Now they are only boots again, heavy and practical, ready to be set aside. Your gloved fingers are warmer than they were outside, but not yet nimble. You tug one glove off with the other hand, then the second, and tuck them under your arm. The skin beneath is pink with cold. When your fingertips find the first buckle, the metal is still frigid enough to sting, just enough to remind you how cold they are. You pause there for one breath, thumb resting on the latch, then press and lift. The buckle releases with a compact click. It is a small sound, though in the reading room, it carries farther than it would anywhere else. Not far enough to disturb anything. Outside, sounds are taken at once by snow and wind and open air. Here, the click lands close, then fades into the wood-paneled hush among the shelves and the low pulse of the fire. You open the next buckle, and then the next, each one giving way with its own small resistance. The boot loosens around your shin. Once the buckles are open, you feel how tight they were. Wool relaxes against skin. The top of the liner eases outward. A little pocket of trapped cold escapes, and you can feel it on your wrist like breath from a just opened window. The room's scent reaches you more clearly when you bend. Resinous larch smoke from the hearth, beeswax from the walnut paneling, damp wool drying by degrees, and beneath it, the dark sweetness of cocoa still somewhere in the room. The smells are warmer lower down, closer to the mat and the boots and your own thawing clothes. Mountain cold has a clean, almost blank smell while you are in it. Indoors, you smell wood, smoke, wet wool, leather, coir. You brace one hand lightly against the wall panel beside the stand and shift your weight to one foot. The movement is familiar, ungainly in the harmless way of all end-of-day ski rituals. Heel first, then ankle. You draw one foot upward inside the loosened shell, and for a second, the liner clings, reluctant to let go of the shape it has kept all day. Then your heel slips free. The instant is unmistakable. The brief drag at the back of the sock, the sudden absence of pressure around the Achilles, the way the foot seems to drop into itself and widen by a fraction as soon as the heel clears. For one beat, it hangs between boot and floor, no longer held, not yet resting anywhere. Then the sock meets the mat. The contact is cooler and rougher than you expect after hours in the boot. Coir catches through the wool with a dry, fibrous firmness, and beneath that, the floor gives back a steadier hardness than snow ever does. Your toes spread at once inside the sock, as if remembering themselves. The foot is not warm yet, not fully, but it is astonishingly light. You stand there for a moment with one foot freed and one still held fast, feeling the difference travel upward through your legs. A faint prickling starts along the ball of the freed foot. Not unpleasant, just the first return of heat. Your ankle feels strangely delicate without the cuff around it. The lower leg above it still carries the memory of support, as if the boot remains there in outline. You notice how much effort had been hidden in simple things: balancing, edging, absorbing the terrain. Once the boot is off, the effort shows itself by disappearing. You bend for the other side. The second glove comes free from under your arm and drops onto the stand's round base with almost no sound. You leave it there. The second set of buckles is easier now that your fingers remember the motion. Click, click, click. Each release lowers the day another notch. The mountain does not vanish. You do not want it to vanish. You want to keep the good part of it, the open air in your lungs, the clean fatigue in your calves, the trace of speed still somewhere behind the knees, without keeping the strain. The buckles understand that better than words do. They open, and the day begins to separate itself into what can be kept and what can be put down. When the second boot loosens, another cool breath leaves the liner. You smile at it without meaning to. You pull your foot free more easily this time. The sock slides against the liner with a muted rasp, and then both feet are on the mat, side by side, in wool. The relief is gradual and complete. Your weight settles differently at once. Without the raised soles and rigid cuffs, you stand lower, closer to the floor, less assembled. The arches of your feet register the surface beneath them. The toes shift, testing room inside the socks. One knee softens, then the other. You feel your balance move out of the alert, slightly forward stance of ski boots and back into an ordinary human one. It is such a small change, and yet it reaches all the way to your jaw. You step out of the boots and leave them where they have come to rest on the mat, slightly splayed, tongues eased open, buckles unclasped. A few drops of meltwater gather at their edges and darken the core beneath. The fibers drink the water slowly. Nothing hurries. The drops round themselves, sink, and disappear into the mat's rough weave. A little more thaw shows at the seams. In your socks, the floor beyond the mat feels cooler than the hearthside air suggests. You take one step, then another, and each board sends up a different message through the wool. Smooth varnish here, a faint join between planks there, a patch that keeps more of the day's chill where the fire does not directly reach. The cool boards make the warmth more noticeable. Your feet are not merely warm or cold, they are changing. That changing is the comfort. You roll your shoulders once and feel your sweater shift against your back. The dampness at the hem where snow had brushed you is already less distinct. Your trousers loosen at the knees now that you are no longer bent to the logic of boots. Everything from the ankle upward begins to drape more naturally. You had entered the room still arranged around exertion. Bit by bit, clothing and muscle and breath return to a shape meant for sitting. Across the room, the green leather wingback chair near the stone hearth waits where you left it with your glance earlier, its arms catching a low amber shine. You are not there yet. The distance is only a few steps, but the threshold ritual has its own pace. It is enough, for now, to stand in your socks and feel warmth rising from the room while the last cold leaves by smaller exits. You lift one foot behind you, balancing lightly on the other, and rub the socked sole against your opposite ankle. Then switch sides. It is an old, absent-minded gesture, half practical, half pleasure. The wool has thickened slightly with use through the day, and the friction wakes more heat along the sides of your feet. Your toes curl and release. Calves, relieved of the boot cuffs, lengthen by a degree. A mild ache remains there, but it is the sort you are glad to find. Proof of snow-covered well and thoroughly. The reading room has its own evening order around you. The walnut shelves absorb the dimness rather than reflecting it. The windows toward the Engadin are already blurred by flurries and edged with condensation at the corners. The fire works steadily in the hearth, not loudly, just enough to mark the room with occasional shifts and a low crack from within the larch. Somewhere in that settled arrangement are the later comforts you noticed on first entering. The blanket folded by the fire, the promise of hot chocolate, the hardback still closed. You glance back once at the boots, freed from your legs. They look heavier than before. Just boots again. Their purpose for the day has narrowed to this: to stand still, to thaw, to release moisture into core and air. The inner liners gape slightly at the top. A buckle strap hangs at an angle. One boot has left a crescent of wet along the mat's ribbing. You know that by morning they will be dry enough to take you back out if you ask it of them. But that belongs to another day. Tonight, they can remain exactly as they are, cooling from use, thawing. Your feet, meanwhile, continue their modest return. Heat reaches the toes first in pulses, then steadies. The insteps soften. Ankles, no longer fixed, make tiny adjustments as you stand. You feel the blood moving there again, not as a rush, but as a patient spread. It is satisfying to notice these things. After hours spent gliding over snow, your attention narrows gladly to the smallest mechanics of being indoors. The pressure of sock against skin, the roughness of coir, the cooler boards, the lessening weight in your legs. You gather your gloves from the stand and drape them over one boot to dry. The gesture completes something. Coat off, scarf loosened, boots shed, hands bare. The mountain remains with you only where you want it now, in the brightness still left in your cheeks, in the mild fatigue of your thighs, in the clean emptiness that follows a day spent mostly in air and motion. The brightness of the day stays with you. The strain doesn't. When you finally turn from the mat, you do so without the clumsy caution of hard shells. Your steps are shorter, quieter, more your own. The room receives them differently in socks than it did in boots. Floorboards answer with the faintest creak. Wool brushes wool at your ankles. The fire's heat finds the fronts of your shins. Ahead, the green leather chair seems to draw nearer with each step. its deep seat and worn arms offering not just rest, but a place to keep that last, bright residue of the mountain while letting the rest fall away. Behind you, the pair by the umbrella stand continue to thaw in place, saying nothing, doing nothing more than darkening the mat by another shade where one last drop disappears into the fibers. And with that, the day has lowered itself another little distance from your body. You are no longer paused at the threshold, still half outside. You have begun to settle into the room's slower measure, carrying less of the mountain with every breath, and keeping exactly enough. Chapter 3. The chair accepts your weight. After the boots, what you want now is to be held up by something other than yourself. And from the mat by the umbrella stand, the chair by the fire is next. You do not go to it quickly. There is no need now for quickness of any kind. The effort of the afternoon still lives in your legs in pleasant ways. A worked heaviness through the calves, a little stiffness at the fronts of the shins where the boots held firm, the faint after-memory of balance still present in the ankles. But you move differently here. Each step can be smaller. Your wool socks make almost no sound over the rug, and the cooler floor beneath them gives way again to warmth as you near the hearth. The shelves rise darkly at the edges of your sight. Walnut gone nearly brown-black in the dimmer light of evening. Ladder rails catch a little fire glow and then lose it. The windows toward the Engadin have become paler than the paneling and darker than the snow beyond. Their panes blurred by flurries and edged with a damp trace where indoor heat meets the glass. The storm is still there, but only as a muted presence now, something sifted through leaded panes and thick walls. Closer to the hearth, the room's scent gathers more distinctly. Resinous larch smoke, beeswax from the wood paneling, damp wool easing toward dryness, a low rise of cocoa from somewhere not yet near enough to touch. None of it asks for your attention. It is simply there, sorting itself into the air while you cross the last few feet to the chair. The green leather wingback chair set near the stone hearth is angled toward both fire and shelves. You notice first its shape rather than its color. The high back with its folded wings, the broad seat, the arms curved by long acquaintance with sleeves and elbows and hands. It is not a chair that requires arrangement. It is already arranged. You pause beside it. Even after the boots are off, some part of you is still braced, as if the mountain might still ask one more thing. The spine keeps a little readiness. The shoulders are not fully lowered. Your weight is still distributed with a skier's care, not yet given over. You notice this only because the chair is so near, because sitting down has become available enough to feel the contrast before it happens. You place one hand on an arm. The leather is cooler than the air around it, a mild, stored coolness that surprises the palm without troubling it. Not cold exactly, just untouched. The surface has that dense, faintly matte feel old leather gets when it has been polished by years more than by cloth. Smooth, but not slippery. Firm under the skin, but with a little give beneath. Your fingers settle there for a beat, and then your other hand comes to the opposite arm, making the chair less an object before you than something ready to take your weight. You turn and lower yourself carefully, not because the chair is fragile, but because your body is still remembering equipment, edges, packed snow, the measured descent of lifts and stairs in ski socks. The backs of your knees meet the front of the seat first, a firm, upholstered edge through wool. You pause there for the briefest instant, balanced between your own effort and what is about to replace it. Then you let yourself go the rest of the way. The cushion receives you with a slow compression, deeper than expected. Leather shifts against wool with a small drag. The upholstery gives one low, familiar creak. It comes as you lean back and let your shoulders drop. And for a beat, the sound seems to hold the whole movement in place. The cushion yielding under your hips, your lower back finding the chair, the last of your weight tipping out of your own keeping. Your hips settle first, then your lower back, then the long line of your spine finding the backrest in sections rather than all at once. A point just above the tailbone gives way, then the middle of the back, then shoulder blades meeting leather. At some point, the muscles along your spine stop working. The back of your head does not quite touch, but the chair rises behind it high enough that it could, later, if you wanted. The seat is broad enough that you do not need to perch. Your thighs are supported almost to the knees. The arms come to meet your forearms at a natural height. And when you rest them there, the slight coolness of the leather returns, this time through the sleeves. It lasts only a little while. Already the warmth from your skin is beginning to gather beneath the cloth, making two shallow ovals where your arms lie still. The first inhale catches a little high, out of habit. Your next breath drops lower. Then comes the first, longer exhale, leaving you without effort, unshaped and steady, as if some fastening around the ribs has quietly come undone. Outside breath had purpose. Even inside at the threshold, it still belonged partly to recovery. Here in the chair, it lengthens on its own. You shift once, only once, pressing your hips a fraction farther back into the seat. The cushion answers with another small adjustment under you. Leather settles. One knee extends a little more than the other. Your feet find an easier angle on the rug. You can feel the day in your legs still, but no longer as demand, more as residue. Warm residue, earned and harmless. From here, the fire is close enough that its heat reaches you in distinct passes, not a constant sheet, more a measured warmth against the front of your shins, then your hands, then the side of your face nearest the hearth. The stone around the fire gives back a steadier kind of heat, less bright, but more lasting. It reaches through the room more slowly, And you can feel that slowness in the chair as well, in the air around your knees, in the wool at your cuffs, in the gradual easing of the cold that had stayed tucked low in your muscles. The room has not grown quieter. Not really. If anything, you hear more from this stillness than you did while standing. A low settling in the grate, a muted passage of wind against the windows. Somewhere deeper in the hotel, too far to disturb the room's shape. The faintest suggestion of movement in a corridor, and then nothing more. The sounds arrive and thin out. You look, without lifting your head much, toward the mat by the brass umbrella stand. The pair of Solomon ski boots remain where you left them, open now, their buckles unclasped, their shape less severe than before. Meltwater has darkened the ribbed coir beneath them in irregular patches. One edge of a liner has tipped outward slightly, as if the boot were breathing off the last trapped cold. It is a relief to see them there, and not on you. They have become room-side objects now, no longer extensions of your legs. The mountain can remain inside them for a while longer. When you turn back toward the hearth, the motion is so unhurried that the chair almost seems to move with you, though of course it does not. What changes is the way your back notices its support. A place between your shoulder blades that had stayed taut on instinct begins to loosen. The small of your back finds the cushion more fully. Even your hands, resting on the leather arms, uncurl by degrees. You had not realized how much of the day remained in your hands. The fingers still remember straps, poles, buckles, zippers, the grip of lift bars and door handles, and the brief, cold shock of metal. Now they have nothing to close around. They rest as they are, slightly bent, warm at the knuckles, cooler at the fingertips for another minute or two. Then that too starts to change. Heat from the room reaches the hands slowly, as if beginning at the wrists and traveling outward. The front of your body yields first. The sternum softens. The belly lets go. The muscles at the tops of the thighs stop carrying even the leftover expectation of standing up again at once. This is the deeper settling, once the chair has your full weight. The leather under your forearms has warmed now. You can feel the exact places where your body has changed it. 2 lengthening strips beneath the sleeves, a tempering of that first untouched coolness into something nearer skin temperature. The chair fits you more closely now, each surface becoming more exact as your weight remains there. The fire gives a small inward sound, not a crack so much as a shift among embers. A brighter seam opens low between the logs and then steadies. Briefly, a clearer warmth reaches your knees. It fades back into the general heat of the hearth, but leaves its trace behind. You think, not in words at first, that this is what you wanted, not the room in the abstract, not even the fire by itself. This specific surrender of weight. The calves can keep their ache. The cheeks can keep the memory of cold. But your back is no longer carrying either one. A faint smell of damp wool rises when you shift one shoulder inside your sweater, and beneath it, the beeswax of the paneling comes through again, warm and dry. The walnut shelves stand in their places around the room with their usual gravity. Books lined in dark rows, ladder rails gleaming dully. Nothing needs arranging. Nothing needs your notice for long. The room is at its best when taken in by portions. One arm of the chair, one patch of hearthstone, one pane of dimmed glass. You let your head rest back another inch. Not all the way, just enough that the high back of the wing chair comes into clearer relation with your neck. The support there is indirect, but unmistakable. It changes the angle of your gaze, lowering it slightly toward the fire and away from the windows. Your chin drops by a fraction. The muscles at the base of the skull release one by one, almost too slowly to detect, except that the face itself feels different afterward, less arranged. This one does the opposite. It reveals its comfort gradually. First the broad cushion, then the arms at the right height, then the back taking more of you than you expected. Then the realization that your own posture has changed without any effort to make it change. You are not perched anymore. Your knees part by a comfortable inch. Your heels settle. Your shoulders no longer hover. The chair has accepted all of this without protest, with only that one low creak at the beginning, and a few smaller murmurs from leather and cushion as they shape themselves under you. The firelight reaches the green of the chair in uneven planes, darkening one arm, lifting a softer sheen on the other. At the seam near your wrist, the leather is slightly cooler still, where your sleeve does not cover the skin fully. You turn your hand and place the bare underside of your wrist there for a moment, just to feel the contrast. Then, even that patch begins to warm. Across the room, the windows keep their snowy blur. The weather beyond them has become almost abstract now, a moving paleness interrupted by the leaded lines of the panes. You do not need to look long. It is enough to know the snow continues and that you are here, with the stone hearth near and the chair carrying your back. Another breath goes in, another goes out. The second is easier than the first, the third easier still. Soon there will be the blanket across your knees, and later the bell-shaped ceramic mug on its silver tray. And after that, the old hardback opening with its dry paper scent. But for now, this is enough to occupy the whole of your attention. The chair under you, the warmth approaching in layers, the last guarded parts of your posture giving way one by one. You sit more deeply. The room keeps its dim order around you, and the chair, warmed now where your forearms rest, holds your weight. Chapter 4. Blanket across the knees. And the chair, warmed now where your forearms rest, goes on taking your weight. You let it take a little more. Your back settles first, then your shoulders, then the worked heaviness in your thighs begins to give up its last need to brace. The leather under you has that old, faintly polished firmness that does not collapse, only yields by degrees. A low crease forms somewhere beneath your hip. The wings at either side of your head keep the fire and the room in a narrower frame, so that the shelves and windows and paneled walls remain present, but farther off now, as if your place in the room has finally been chosen. Across from you, the fire shifts inward with a dull red settling among the logs. The stone hearth breathes out a steady heat that reaches your shins more than your knees more than your lap. Lower down, the mountain still clings to you. You can feel it in the fronts of your legs, in the coolness that remains tucked behind your kneecaps, in your ankles, where the boots held you all afternoon and only recently let go. It is not unpleasant. It is the after image of the slopes, the last chill of the day. Then the blanket is brought over you. You hear it before you feel it. The brushed drag of wool lifted and opened. The brief, dry hush of thick fabric moving through warmer air. The striped blanket has spent the afternoon folded near the fire, taking in heat by layers. When it is drawn over your knees, it arrives with weight before warmth. It lands with real weight, the kind of wool that settles rather than floats. It crosses your lap and shins in one broad fall, and your hands move almost without thought to catch its edges. It changes how you sit at once. Until now, you have been warm in the room. With the blanket over you, the warmth stays with you. It gathers closer. It stays where it lands. The chair supports you from beneath and behind, but the wool makes a second boundary, one that begins at your knees and slopes down over your shins, holding the heat under it. Fire on one side, leather behind, wool across the legs. The evening narrows to a more manageable size. You smooth the blanket once with your palms. Its surface is not slick, not soft in the way of brushed cotton, but dry and faintly rough, with the lanolin long washed down to a ghost of itself. The weave is dense. Your fingertips can feel the raised crossings of thread, the firmness of cloth made to last through many winters and many knees beneath it. The stripes run broad and even, old-fashioned without trying to be. You do not need to look down to know where they are. Your hands learn them through pressure. Under the blanket, your wool socks meet its underside with a quieter friction. Sock against blanket, blanket against trouser cloth against skin still remembering cold. The layers make their own patient work. Heat does not rush there. It arrives in increments so small that noticing them becomes its own pleasure. First, your knees stop feeling exposed. Then, the fronts of your shins lose their remaining chill. Your calves, still carrying the pleasant ache of skiing, begin to loosen where they touch the chair's lower cushion. Farther down, your ankles remain cool for a while longer, as if the day has folded itself most tightly there. You shift one heel a little beneath the wool. The blanket answers with a muted scrape over your sock. then settles again. That sound, fabric against fabric, is one of the room's evening sounds now, joining the low pulse from the hearth and the softened weather at the windows. Beyond the leaded panes, the Engadin has faded into a pale blur. Snow still crosses the glass in diagonal threads, though from here it is less a storm than a moving dimness. Along the edges of the panes, condensation has gathered in a fine lace where the room's heat meets the cold outside. It catches a little of the firelight and then gives it back without shine. You draw the blanket higher by an inch or two. The top edge comes up over your knees with a firmer line, and the wool presses into the hollows beside them. Your forearms, resting again on the chair's arms, feel the difference immediately. Your whole lower half is more contained now, less open to the room. The worked muscles in your legs stop paying attention to the room at large. They turn instead toward the slow increase of heat under the wool from the threshold, where your Salomon ski boots remain on the ribbed Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand. There comes no sound at all, but you can picture them without looking. Buckles unclasped, tongues eased open, the dark shells still giving off the last trapped cold. A little meltwater will have darkened the mat beneath them by now. The boots are done for the day, and your legs are starting to believe it. The scent in the room thickens as you sit longer. Resinous larch smoke from the hearth, beeswax in the walnut paneling, damp wool drying somewhere not far from the fire, your own things among it. Perhaps another guest's scarf on a stand in the hall beyond, and beneath those, the cocoa note that has been present from the start, faint but steady, as if the room remembers cups set down here every evening after the lifts close. Breathing it in, you feel your chest deepen by a fraction. Not a deliberate breath, only an easier one. Again, your hands move over the blanket. One palm presses near your right knee, the other farther down your shin, flattening a ridge in the wool. The fabric gives a little, and then keeps the shape you have made. You do not need to do much more than that. The blanket is already in place. It has enough weight to remain where it is put, enough body to stay draped over the slopes of your legs instead of slipping away. That reliability has its own comfort. You need not gather it constantly back around you. You need only sit within it. The fire reaches your knees more clearly now. It is a distinct stage in the thaw, this moment when the heat begins to penetrate the outer layers and find the deeper cold beneath. The fronts of your thighs warm first, then the warmth slides downward through cloth and muscle, taking its time. Your calves answer more slowly. They have worked all afternoon, turning and absorbing and holding. Now they lengthen against the chair cushion by such small degrees that the release is almost hidden inside stillness. You notice it only because the ache changes character. It is no longer the active ache of use. It becomes the broad, satisfying heaviness that comes after use has ended. A fold of the blanket has fallen near your left ankle, leaving a narrow place where cooler air can still reach. You feel it there, a little seam of chill along the bone. Then you tuck the corner in. Only a modest movement, just enough to draw the edge beneath and around that ankle, snugging the wool closer to the sock. The tucked corner keeps the draft off your ankle. The difference is immediate and precise. The cooler thread of air disappears. In its place comes a denser warmth, not hotter, only more complete. Your foot grows still. The whole lower line of the blanket lies neater over both feet, and your legs seem to understand at once that they have been fully accounted for. The chair gives a faint leather murmur when you sink another fraction deeper. One shoulder drops, then the other. Your neck finds the angle it wanted from the beginning. The wings of the chair keep the room from spreading too wide around you. And because of that, every nearby sensation becomes clearer. The warmth gathered in the chair arms under your forearms, the wool's pressure across your knees, the slight coolness that still lives at the very tips of your toes, the fire's steady exhale against your shins. Even the sleeves of your sweater make themselves known when you shift your wrists. A soft drag of wool over wool. Your knees soften downward under the weight. It is a lovely, specific sensation, that downward softening. The weight is light but steady. The muscles across the tops of your thighs stop keeping any unnecessary tone. The joints beneath your knees feel less exposed. Even your shins, those bright, weathered surfaces that met cold and speed and packed snow all afternoon, seem to withdraw from alertness and enter another state entirely. Covered, enclosed, still. A small sound comes from the hearth as one piece of wood settles against another. Not a crack, not a spark shower, only a low, inward adjustment. The room grows dimmer by nearly nothing, then steadies. On the side table beside you, there is as yet no silver tray, no bell-shaped ceramic mug warming your hands. In your lap, there is as yet no old hardback, no deckled page to turn. Those comforts are still ahead. For now, the evening asks for less. For now, it is enough to feel the wool over your knees and know that the next layer of warmth has begun. You let your fingers curl into the blanket's edge. The selvage is thicker there, a little firmer under the fingertips. You rub it once between thumb and forefinger and feel the compactness of the weave. It has been washed many times, dried many times, folded and unfolded beside this fire through many winters. It carries that history not as sentiment, but as use. A slight flattening at the creases, a dependable drape, a warmth that seems to rise from within once it has been near the hearth for an hour or two. You think of how often this same wool must have crossed tired knees after the lifts close. And then the thought fades, because your own knees are enough to attend to. Under the blanket, warmth continues its patient climb. It reaches the hollows behind your knees at last. And when it does, some deeper reserve of effort lets go. The release is subtle, but unmistakable. Your legs, which carried you over snow and held you upright through the last of the cold at the threshold, and then brought you to this chair, no longer need to do anything at all. They can simply be warm. They can simply be heavy. The wool over them confirms it again and again with every second that passes, until even the idea of shifting feels unnecessary. You breathe in the larch smoke and beeswax and drying wool. You breathe out into the warmer pocket under the blanket. The fire keeps to its work. Snow goes on crossing the windows. Somewhere in the ordered distance of the hotel, beyond the reading room and its dark shelves, evening continues in the muted way of winter lodges. But here, near the hearth, with the blanket drawn over your knees and tucked at one ankle, the night has narrowed to pressure, heat, and the slow, untroubled surrender of your legs. And after a while, even the thought of warmth gives way to the feeling of it, and the feeling of it asks nothing more. Chapter 5. Hot chocolate on silver. And after a while, even the thought of warmth gives way to the feeling of it. You have nearly stopped adjusting yourself in the chair. The blanket has found its place across your knees and shins. The leather has taken the shape of your back for the evening, and the fire has settled into a steadier, deeper heat that reaches you without effort. Your hands, which had been resting loosely on the blanket, no longer need to clasp one another for warmth. They lie open now, palms down for a time, then one hand draped over the other, as if even your fingers have understood that the work of the day is finished. The walnut shelves rise beyond the edge of your attention. The windows toward the Engadin are only a dim, pale presence now, their panes blurred by flurries and edged with moisture where the warmth meets the glass. What remains nearest is the hearth, the leather under your shoulders, the wool over your legs, the faint dryness of the old hardback waiting nearby, and the room's familiar mingling of resinous larch smoke, beeswax on wood paneling, damp wool slowly drying. Then another note enters it. You hear it before you turn your head. The light touch of silver on wood. A small, delicate tap from the side table beside you, so restrained that it seems at first, but it is followed by the briefest stir of air and the fresh rise of cocoa, fuller now, darker and sweeter than the trace that had already been woven through the room. By the time you glance over, the tray is there. A bell-shaped ceramic mug of dark, hot chocolate sits on a small silver tray, the handle turned within easy reach. The cream on top has been spooned on in a small crown, not piled high, just enough to soften the dark surface beneath it. A dusting of cinnamon lies over the cream, and along one side where the steam has already begun to dampen it into tiny, rust-colored specks. It has been set down without a word. You have not heard a voice. You have barely heard a step. Only that one faint tap remains, and then the room has resumed its old measure. For a moment, you simply look at it. The mug is made to be held in both hands. Its rounded body swells warmly under the narrowing neck, and the glaze catches the firelight in a muted sheen. Steam rises from it in thin folds, visible only when it passes in front of the darker shelves or the stone of the hearth. The silver tray beneath it reflects a blurred crescent of orange from the fire and the pale underside of the mug. And on the tray's edge, there is a tiny bead of condensation already gathering where a drop has run down from the cup. You let one hand leave the blanket first. The air above your lap feels cooler than the wool beneath it, and your fingers notice the difference at once. Then your hand closes around the mug's side rather than the handle, testing the heat through the ceramic. It is warm enough to make you pause, not from discomfort, but from pleasure. The kind of heat that asks for a second before the skin learns it. Your other hand comes around to the far side, and now you cup the mug in both hands, your thumbs resting near the rim, your fingers curved around the bell of it. The warmth enters through the hands more quickly than through any other part of you. It moves into the fingers first, into the small joints that had stiffened around poles and buckles and cold sippers. Then into the heels of the palms, into the wrists, and a little way up the forearms, where the sleeves of your sweater have fallen back. You feel yourself adjusting around that warmth without deciding to. Your shoulders ease another fraction downward. Your elbows settle more heavily against the chair arms. The mug rests above the blanket like a contained source of weather, its heat rising against your face. When you lean closer, the scent deepens. Cocoa first, dark, almost bitter before the sweetness arrives. Then cream, warm and faintly rich. Then cinnamon, no more than a trace, enough to sharpen the air above the mug, and then disappear again into the steam. It joins the larch smoke from the hearth and the beeswax from the paneling, and the damp wool that is still drying by degrees. Not as separate notes, but as one winter indoor scent. Old wood and fire and cloth, and something made warm to drink. You do not hurry the first sip. The mug is heavy enough that you lift it with both hands, the base clearing the tray, then the side table, then the level of the blanket. Your thumbs shift against the ceramic for balance. The rim meets your lower lip first, and you wait there a second, letting the steam warm your face. Your cheeks still hold a memory of the cold from outside, though fainter now, and the rising heat touches that last brightness and eases it away. The first sip is darker than you expected. Not thin, not overly sweet, but dark and thick enough to coat the tongue before it slips down. The cream has begun to soften into the chocolate, so that the surface gives you a little coolness and then warmth together. Cinnamon reaches you last, almost after the swallow, as if it had been hidden in the steam and only now settled. You feel the drink move downward in a single warm line, from mouth to throat to chest. And that inward warmth is different from the fire's. The fire reaches your shins, your hands, the side of your face. This warms you differently. It arrives under the sternum, low and spreading, and remains there. You lower the mug again, carefully, until it hovers above your lap. For a moment, you do not set it down. You keep both hands around it and feel the heat continue through the ceramic. The old hardback remains closed nearby, patient in its waiting, its cloth-bound spine and deckled pages for later. For now, it is enough that it is there, adding its faint scent of dust, vanilla, and dry winter air whenever the steam shifts and makes room for it. Another sip, smaller this time. You begin to notice the cream changing shape. The little crown has softened at one edge, where the hot chocolate has lapped against it. A pale swirl trails into the dark surface, and the cinnamon has spread into a finer stain. The top of the drink looks less arranged now, more like something already being enjoyed. And that, too, changes the feeling of the evening. The boots by the brass umbrella stand are cooling into stillness on the Coir Mat, their meltwater long since darkening the fibers. The blanket is no longer newly placed. The chair no longer feels borrowed for an hour. The mug in your hands marks another step inward, another layer of the day released. You take your time because the drink allows it. Each sip requires a small sequence of movements that the body begins to learn and repeat. Fingers tightening slightly around the curve, wrists lifting, shoulders staying low, chin tipping down just enough. Then the pause at the rim while the steam reaches your face. Swallow, lower, rest. The rhythm is simple enough to become automatic. You find yourself watching the steam instead, how it rises in a narrow thread and then disappears as it reaches the cooler air between you and the windows. The side table remains within reach, though you leave the mug in your hands a little longer than is necessary. The silver tray beneath it has already gone still. No spoon rattles against the ceramic. No saucer shifts. The service has been arranged for silence, and silence is what remains. Somewhere in the building, very far off, a muted footstep passes along a corridor and is gone. The fire gives a low crack from within the larch. Then, once again, there is only the room and the mug and the weather beyond the panes. When at last you set the cup down, the tray answers with a gentler sound than before, more a small settling than a tap. Your hands remain curved for a second after they release it, preserving the shape of the mug. The skin of your palms still carries its heat. You rub one thumb slowly across the fingertips of the other hand and feel how much warmer they are now than they were a few minutes ago. It is a particular comfort, hand warmth. More immediate than warm feet, almost. It reaches the whole body by suggestion. You draw the blanket a touch higher over one knee without looking down. The wool gives a dry, dense shift against your trousers and then settles again. Beneath it, your legs have begun to lose that last mountain chill kept low in the bones. The ache in your calves is still there, but mellowed now, transformed from effort into memory. You can feel where the day remains in you and where it has already gone. The mug steams on the tray beside you, and after a little while, you reach for it again, this time by the handle first, then bringing your other hand around the body of it. The handle is warm, but not nearly as satisfying as the broad curve of the cup, and so both hands return to their earlier place. The ceramic has cooled slightly, enough that you can hold it more easily, enough that the heat feels less like surprise and more settled. The next swallow is slower. The chocolate has thickened slightly as it stands. The cream is nearly dissolved now, leaving only a pale crescent at the edge. Cinnamon has spread into the surface so that each sip carries it more evenly. You taste more of the cocoa itself, dark and rounded, and less of the sweetness. It suits the hour. Outside, the snow continues to move past the windows in a blur too fine to follow. Inside, the room grows dimmer by increments too small to count. The fire no longer flares brightly at each shift of the log. It glows from within, orange at the center, red at the edges, steady against the stone. You rest the mug lightly against the blanket for a moment, cushioned by your hands, and feel the heat pass through wool into your knees. Not much, just a little, enough to notice, enough to make you smile without needing to. Perhaps it was Herr Baumann who brought it. Perhaps another hand from the corridor, practiced in entering and leaving without drawing the room outward after it. It hardly matters. What matters is the exactness of it. The mug arriving when the first layer of warmth had already done its work, and a deeper one was needed. The tray placed close enough that you did not have to lean. The cream still intact. The cinnamon no more than a breath across the top. In a place like this, care often appears in that form, not announced, only present when your hand reaches for it. Another sip, then a pause long enough to listen to the faint ticking from the hearthstone as heat shifts through it. Long enough to feel the chair's leather warm beneath your forearms, where it had first been cool. Long enough for the steam to touch your upper lip and vanish. The mug grows a little lighter in your hands each time you lift it, though not by much. There is no need to finish it soon. The evening is not measured that way. Your gaze drifts once toward the windows. The condensation at the edges of the panes has thickened into a fine, blurred lace. Beyond it, the Engadin has dissolved into weather and dusk, blue-gray and white, all detail taken away by the falling snow. The contrast pleases you more now than it did when you first came in. Then it was relief. Now it is confirmation. The cold remains where it belongs, on the far side of the glass. Here there is leather warmed by your weight, wool across your knees, a book waiting nearby, and a dark drink cupped in both hands. You take another mouthful and let it stay on the tongue a moment before swallowing. The warmth follows the same path as before, but more slowly now because you are paying closer attention. Throat, chest, the center of you easing open around it. The body receives heat in layers. Fire at the skin, wool at the legs, ceramic at the hands. Then this, moving inward where no blanket reaches. And because of that inward warmth, the room changes again around you, though none of its objects have moved. The shelves remain lined in dark walnut. The unread newspapers lie where they were left. The boots remain by the umbrella stand, breathing out the last of the day's cold. But your place among these things has deepened. You are no longer simply warming yourself in the room. You are taking the room in, taking in its cocoa and cinnamon and stored heat, letting it become part of the same slow thaw that began when the door closed behind you. The mug returns to the tray once more. A final bead of steam reaches your face. Your hands settle around it again almost at once, unwilling yet to give up that shape, that warmth, that small hearth between the palms. And after a few more breaths, you lift it once more, already a little heavier in the drowsy way of repeated comfort, and drink. Chapter 6. The book opens slowly, and after a few more breaths, you lift it once more, already a little heavier in the drowsy way of repeated comfort, and drink. The chocolate leaves a deeper warmth this time, not just in your mouth and throat, but lower, warming you in the same slow way the fire has. When you set the mug back on the silver tray, the ceramic meets it with the faintest touch. Cream still clings in a pale crescent near the rim. A trace of cinnamon rises with the steam and folds into the room's older scents. Resinous larch smoke from the hearth, beeswax in the wood paneling, damp wool drying by degrees, and the cocoa itself, darker now that you have disturbed it. Your hand lingers on the mug a moment longer, palm curved around its bell-shaped side, as if reluctant to leave even that small warmth without finding another to take its place. Then your fingers ease away and return to the old hardback now resting across your lap. Its weight familiar already. The blanket over your knees shifts under the hardback's corners. Beneath the wool, your legs have nearly forgotten the cold, though here and there, a thread of mountain chill still remains in the ankles and behind the knees, tucked deep where warmth arrives last. The old hardback feels solid in your lap. Its cloth-bound spine is worn smoother at the middle than at the ends, as if many hands before yours have opened it to one cherished region more often than the rest. The boards are firm beneath your fingertips. The edges of the deckled pages make a soft, uneven line, not sharp, but feathery with use. And when your thumb moves along them, you feel each little rise and fall, each tiny cut of paper left irregular on purpose, the way older books often are. You do not open it at once. For a little while, you only rest your hands there, one near the lower corner, one across the front board, and feel the room continue around you. The chair supports the full length of your back now. The green leather under your forearms has lost its first coolness and taken on your heat. Somewhere in the grate, a log settles inward with a low, compact sound. Beyond the windows, the Engadin has gone almost entirely to weather and dimness, the flurries pressing the view back until the glass shows more firelight than landscape. You want something quiet and near. A book will do. At last, you slip one hand beneath the front board and lift. The spine gives with the slight resistance of a reread book. Not stiffness exactly, more a remembered curve, a preference in the binding for the places it has opened before. The cover parts from the text block by degrees, the hinge loosening little by little under your hand. A breath of paper rises at once, dust, vanilla, and that dry winter air books seem to keep in themselves, no matter how warm the room around them becomes. It is an old smell, papery and faintly sweet, and for a moment you do not look down at the print at all. You only breathe it in. Then the first page comes free. Its turn begins almost before it moves, with the lightest loosening under your thumb. The paper lifts, hesitates, and then travels over with a dry, brushing sound, clearer than it would be anywhere else, only because the room has grown so still around you. Not loud, just distinct. The grain catches lightly at your skin. For a moment, the page hangs in a shallow arc, holding a little of the firelight in its curve, before it settles to the left. The page turn narrows the room further. You rest there for a moment with the book open. The firelight reaches the paper unevenly, warming one margin more than the other. The type is small enough that you must lower your gaze fully to meet it. A few lines begin near the top of the page, black and steady against the cream. But even before you read, the shape of the paragraphs is comforting. The measured blocks of text, the modest top margin, the faint shadow in the gutter where the spine curves inward. The page itself has a temperature cooler than your hands, and that slight coolness feels good against the fingertips that have been around the mug. You begin, not quickly, not with the intention of going far. The first sentence comes slowly. A few words stand out. Then the line carries on. Then another. The eye moves. The mind receives enough. The hand steadies the page. The chair bears your weight. The blanket stays over your knees. The fire keeps working at the last hidden pockets of cold. Every few lines, your thumb shifts along the lower edge of the paper. The deckled pages are pleasant to touch, in a way newer pages rarely are. Their edges are not machine perfect. They have tooth. They remind your hand that paper is made of fibers, pressed and dried and cut, not simply produced. You find yourself stroking the foredge once with your thumb pad, feeling the tiny, irregular steps there, before returning to the line where your eye had paused. You read a little more. Soon the words begin to loosen at the edges, not from fatigue exactly, but from warmth. A sentence arrives clearly, then leaves behind less meaning than texture. Another follows. Certain phrases catch and stay for a breath or two, while others pass through almost untouched. At first, you follow. Then you drift near the surface of the lines. Then your thumb shifts again at the lower corner, and your eyes return. A little farther, another sentence. The page cool under one finger. The faint smell of paper rising whenever you lower your face slightly toward it. Your calves, which had held the memory of turns and traverses even after the boots came off, have eased further into the chair. The blanket presses a little more firmly across your shins now that your legs are no longer adjusting beneath it. One ankle shifts under the wool and finds a warmer pocket. The leather gives a tiny, settled creak under your shoulder as you let your back sink another fraction deeper. You pause to lift the mug again. The hot chocolate has cooled just enough to be taken in a longer sip. The cream has thinned into the dark surface, leaving only a pale trace at the edge. Cinnamon meets you first, then cocoa, rich and faintly bitter under the sweetness. When you lower the mug, a ribbon of steam touches your face and is gone. You place it back on the tray without looking, guided by the remembered position of the table at your side, and your hand returns almost at once to the lower corner of the open page. The room has simplified. Fire, book, blanket, mug. Shelves rising in dark walnut beyond the edge of your attention. Windows turned to dim panes and weather. The pair of Solomon ski boots remain where you left them on the ribbed Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand. But they belong to another version of the evening already, one closer to the door and the cold. Here, by the hearth, your world has narrowed to paper, wool, leather, heat. You read until your eyes reach the bottom of the page. Then there is the small decision all readers know, whether to stop there for a while or to continue. Your fingers slide to the upper corner. The paper is dry and thin enough to flex with almost no effort, but not so thin that it feels fragile. You separate one page from the next with the pad of your thumb, and for a moment, the two cling together, then part. The turn is slower than the first. The page arcs over with another papery brush and comes down against its fellows on the left. Again, that sound seems larger in the calm. Again, the page settles. You look at the new spread, and for a few breaths, you do not read. You only let your eyes move over the changed arrangement of text. There is comfort in that too, in seeing that there is more of the book still ahead. More pages gathered thickly in the right hand, fewer now in the left. The cloth-bound spine rests more easily in your lap now that it has been opened. The book has accepted this place for the evening. One hand supports the lower board, while the other lies lightly across the margin, ready to keep the page from lifting in the faint currents near the fire. The paper smell remains close, mingling with cocoa whenever you lower your face a little. A thought comes and passes. Perhaps this book has often been read in weather like this, in rooms where snow pressed against the windows and boots dried by a door, in chairs where someone, after a day outdoors, wanted words nearby, but not too near. The thought does not need to go further. It is enough to feel yourself joining that old, repeated use. You continue, but more slowly than before. Sometimes your eyes move over a line and return to it because the first pass did not quite take. Sometimes they do not return. You look down, follow a sentence, pause with your finger resting in the margin. Breathe in paper, cocoa, smoke, beeswax. Let one paragraph end before the next begins. The hearth gives a low, enclosed crackle. Your thumb finds the foredge and traces its unevenness once, then leaves it. After a few lines, your gaze drifts, then comes back, almost of its own accord, to the black print waiting where you left it. The room grows dimmer by such small degrees that you notice it only when the cream of the page seems warmer than before, more amber under the firelight. The margins are no longer bright. The print draws a little closer to the glow. Outside, the flurries continue to blur the panes, and a fine lace of condensation along the edges of the glass catches what light remains and dulls it. You shift one hand beneath the book and feel the weight of it settle more fully into your lap. Not heavy enough to tire you, only present, reassuringly present. The corner of the blanket bunches slightly under the lower board, and you smooth it without looking. Then leave your palm resting there for a breath, feeling wool under cloth, cloth under paper, paper under hand. Layers, each warmer than the last. A sentence catches you and holds for a little while. You read it again, not because it is difficult, but because its shape is pleasing. The words move through your mind with the same measured pace as the fire settling inward. Then even that sentence softens, and what remains is not its meaning so much as its cadence. Another page waits. Not yet. You stay where you are, halfway down the spread, eyes moving and pausing, moving and pausing. The leather at your shoulders is warm now all the way through. The blanket over your knees has grown heavier in the pleasant way wool does once it has fully taken your heat. The hot chocolate beside you is still warm enough to lift again when you want it. The old hardback rests open, compliant at last. And below your gaze, the unread portion of the page gathers itself, line by line. Near your right hand, the next page lies thin and quiet, its corner ready to be found. Chapter 7. Herr Baumann at Dusk. The page has found its place in your lap. One hand still rests near the gutter of the old hardback, feeling the cloth-bound spine under your thumb, while the other drifts back toward the mug, and then stops halfway, content to remain on the blanket instead. The fire has changed since you first sat down. Earlier, it had a more active sound to it, a brighter crackle from the larger pieces catching. Now it works lower in the grate. The logs have burned inward. Red has replaced orange in the deeper parts, and the heat that reaches your shins feels steadier, less lively, more settled into itself. Beyond the windows, the Engadin has almost gone from view. The panes are dim with flurries, and edged with that faint lace of condensation that has been gathering all evening. What remains of the world outside is mostly tone now, a blue-gray dusk thickening behind the glass, the suggestion of snow moving through it, and from time to time, the duller white of a flake striking near enough to be seen before it melts into the blur. You do not look for detail there. The room has made detail unnecessary. The walnut shelves along the walls have darkened with the hour. Their ladder rails catch less light now. Only a low sheen where the fire reaches them. The newspapers on the side table across from you lie in the same loose stack they have occupied since late afternoon, folded and untouched. Their corners have softened from handling long ago, though not today. No one has wanted them. No one is likely to want them now. You turn one more page. The paper gives its dry, familiar sound, and then the room returns to the slow measures it has been keeping all along. A pulse from the fire, a faint settling from the chair as your weight shifts by hardly more than an inch. The occasional faint touch of ceramic against silver when your knuckle brushes the tray. The hot chocolate has cooled just enough to drink without caution. The crown of cream has thinned into a pale ring near the rim. Cinnamon rises when you lift it, and beneath that, the darker scent of cocoa, deep and almost earthy, folds into the resinous larch smoke and the beeswax from the paneling. Raising the mug takes a little time. Setting it down takes a little time. The blanket must be adjusted afterward, just once, over one knee where it has slipped. Your forearms sink more fully into the warmed leather arms of the chair. The first coolness they held when you sat down has long since disappeared. The leather gives back the heat of your sleeves now, and at your shoulders, the chair has that lived-in firmness which supports without pressing. Then, somewhere beyond the reading room, a door closes. Not near, deep in the lodge. A single padded thud through carpets and paneling and corridor turns. It reaches you already softened by distance, and then the building settles around it. For a moment, you listen. Not because anything has changed in a way that asks for attention, but because the old hotel has its own evening sounds, and they come one at a time, with long spaces between. A footstep passes overhead, or perhaps farther down the corridor, too muffled to place. Then nothing again except the fire. In that pause, the handle turns. The reading room door opens with practiced care. Not enough to disturb the warmth, only enough to let in a narrow seam of cooler air from the corridor. You do not startle. By now, the hour itself has prepared you for this. Herr Baumann appears in the opening with the kind of unobtrusive exactness that belongs to him. He is simply there. He closes the door behind him before taking another step. The latch settles with a small click. The hush returns at once, complete again, only fractionally altered by the brief touch of corridor air that has already disappeared into the room's warmth. Herr Baumann moves without hurry and without any wasted motion. He never seems to carry the day in on his clothes. Snow may be falling outside. Guests may still be stamping melt from their boots in the entrance hall. Trunks may be arriving. Telephones ringing somewhere below. But none of that reaches him here. In the reading room, he moves with the room's order. Dark jacket brushed flat, cuffs clean, silver hair neat above a collar that sits exactly as it should. He gives you the smallest inclination of the head, not enough to require an answer. You return it anyway, almost without moving, and the exchange is complete. In one hand, he carries a single split log of larch. It is not large, not a great armful, not a clumsy replenishing of the fire. Only one piece chosen for this hour, dry and pale at the fresh split, its bark rougher and darker along one side. As he crosses to the hearth, the scent of the wood reaches you before the sound of it does. Resin, clean and faintly sharp, different from the deeper smoke already in the room. You lower your eyes from the page and watch him in the way one watches a familiar movement that needs no explanation. He sets the iron screen aside just enough. The hinges make almost no sound. Then he crouches, with the ease of someone who has done this for years, and knows exactly how much heat will meet him at the grate. The firelight brightens against his sleeve and the side of his hand. Inside, the logs have burned down to a red architecture of embers and darker wood. A low flame still works at one edge. You can see where the next piece will go before he places it there, in a narrow space left open. Herr Baumann lays the split log across that gap with care, not dropping it, only settling it onto the bed of heat until wood meets ember. For a breath or two, nothing happens except contact. Then the larch begins to catch. The log gives off a fresh resin smell first. After that comes the first small answering crack from within the log as heat reaches inward. A line of brightness appears along the lower seam where it rests on the embers. Not flame yet, only the beginning of it. The sound is so slight that it changes the room less than the scent does. Still, you feel the difference. The fire has been restored, not to brightness exactly, but to duration. The fire will last longer now. Herr Baumann remains there for a moment, one hand near the iron screen, watching the placement in the same brief, attentive way a person watches a poured cup to make sure it is set fully down. He knows by sight what the wood is doing, whether it has taken properly, whether air can reach it, whether the bed beneath it is hot enough. Satisfied, he eases the screen back into place. The metal gives a low contact sound against the stone lip, then is still. The small act steadies the room. Not dramatic, not even especially notable, And yet, the room changes around it. By now, it is fully evening. What remains now is evening properly arrived. The reading room has crossed into that later hour when people stop considering whether they might go elsewhere and simply stay where they are. Herr Baumann rises. Firelight leaves his hands. He turns from the hearth and goes to the newspapers. There are 3 of them on the side table, perhaps 4, arranged in a spread that no one has disturbed enough to disorder, and no one has respected enough to align. One has slipped half an inch over another. A folded corner has opened. The top paper sits a little askew, as though someone earlier in the day set it down while reaching for tea and never came back to it. You had noticed none of this until he places his fingertips on the stack. He straightens them in 2 motions. First, he lifts the top paper and taps its lower edge against the others. Then he squares the whole stack to the table, parallel with the grain of the wood. That is all. But in that all is the peculiar completeness of accustomed work. He does not fuss. He does not improve beyond what is needed. The newspapers remain unread, but now they are straight. The silver tray beside you catches a little more firelight as he passes, and for a moment, the bell-shaped mug reflects a curved ember red on its glaze. The cream has nearly dissolved. A faint skin has formed where the cocoa has cooled near the rim. You think you may take another sip in a minute, but not yet. Herr Baumann's gaze moves once around the room in a way that is less inspection than confirmation. Chair, side table, hearth, windows, shelves. The pair of Solomon's ski boots remain by the brass umbrella stand on the ribbed Coir Mat where you left them. Their open buckles dull in the dimness, their shape softened now that the inner liners have long since given up the last trapped cold. The mat beneath them has dried in patches where meltwater had darkened it earlier. Your gloves are where you placed them. Nothing is out of place except by use, and use is allowed. He gives another slight nod, this one almost to the room itself rather than to you, and turns back toward the door. He leaves without disturbing the room. No draft, no disruption. Only the sharpened line of the newspapers, the fresh log beginning to catch, and the more distinct thread of larch in the air. When he opens the door again, the corridor beyond shows only a warmer darkness and a strip of carpet. Then he is through it. The latch settles once more. You are alone again, though alone is not quite the word for it. The room feels tended. For a little while, you do not read. The book stays open in your lap, your thumb resting between pages to keep the place. You listen to the changed fire. The new log has begun its work now, not with a flourish. A small crack opens along the grain. A tongue of flame lifts and withdraws, then returns to the same spot with more confidence. The embers beneath shift inward, and one red seam brightens where the added weight has pressed down. Heat reaches your knees through the blanket in a more even band. You breathe in. Resinous larch smoke. Beeswax on the walnut paneling. damp wool drying by degrees, though less damp now than before. Cocoa lifting from the mug whenever the steam stirs. The room's scent has deepened with the hour, each part of it less separate than it was earlier. You can still tell one from another if you attend to them, but there is no need. They have settled together. Outside the windows, the last distinction between sky and slope has nearly gone. The panes reflect more of the room than the snow now. A pale shape of firelight, a darker suggestion of shelves, the edge of your chair turned to shadow. Along the glass, a line of condensation gathers itself into a bead and slides down in a slow path before disappearing into the lower blur. You lift the mug at last. The ceramic is warm rather than hot. That change suits the hour. The cocoa is thicker now, the sweetness less immediate, the cinnamon more noticeable at the back of the sip. When you set the mug down, the tray gives the faintest contact against the side table, scarcely more than a tick. Then your hand returns to the page. The hardback opens a little wider under its own old habit. The deckled edge brushes your thumb. Dust and vanilla and dry winter air rise from the paper when you turn another leaf. The lines before you are easy to follow, but not urgent. Their company is enough. You read a sentence, then another. Somewhere in the grate, the new log answers with a low crack and settles more firmly among the embers. Not arranged for display, not made formal, simply set right for the night. The newspapers squared, the fire fed, the boots drying by the umbrella stand, the chair warm at your back, the blanket heavy over your knees, the mug within reach. Beyond the panes, snow continues across the darkened Engadin, visible only when it catches what little light remains. You let your shoulders sink another fraction into the leather. The book rests more fully in your lap. Heat moves through the wool at your shins, into your ankles, into the places the ski boots held for hours and have finally released. The larch catches a little more. The room grows dimmer by such small degrees that you notice it only when the page asks for a closer look. And even then, the fire provides enough. So you read on for a line or two, then pause. Breathe in the cocoa and the wood smoke. Listen to the low, newly strengthened fire, and feel, without needing to name it any further, how completely the evening has turned. Chapter 8. Snow at the leaded windows. And feel, without needing to name it any further, how completely the evening has turned. After that, your eyes drift from the page without effort. The old hardback stays open in your lap, its deckled leaves resting against your thumbs. But you stop reading for a while. Firelight still reaches the lower margin. The cloth-bound spine rests in the familiar hollow made by blanket and knees. Yet your attention moves elsewhere. Not far, only across the room to the windows and the weather gathered there. From the chair, you can see the leaded panes in sections. each one dimmer now than it was an hour ago. The Engadin beyond has withdrawn into weather and pale glow. What had once been slope and tree line, and the suggestion of distant roofs, has softened until almost none of it keeps its edges. Snow passes before the glass in slanting threads and thicker bursts, then in finer grain again. You look toward it with no need to answer it. That is part of the pleasure now. The storm can go on without you. You've had enough of the cold for one day. The windows hold it outside and make it visible. You do not look out with any wish to go back into it. That part of the day is over in you. The calves that carried you downhill and across traverses are under the blanket now, slowly forgetting their work. Even your hands, one still curved near the mug and one resting against the open page, have changed allegiance. They belong to the room now. Looking toward the windows is no summons. It is only contrast, and the contrast pleases you. The room behind you, around you, remains as it has been. Walnut shelves darkened by years and polish, beeswax in the paneling, larch smoke from the hearth, damp wool drying by degrees, cocoa rising whenever the mug is lifted. The snow outside makes the chair beneath you, the blanket over your knees, and the tempered heat on your shins easier to feel. Along the side of your face nearest the glass, there is still a cooler awareness. Not cold exactly, only the knowledge of weather held at a distance. Your thumb rests against the rough cut of the paper. The top edge of the page is cool where it has been away from your palm. Lower down, near the gutter, it has taken a little warmth from your lap. Such small differences become easy to notice at this hour. You listen as much as you look. At the windows, the storm is reduced to a muffled rush, softened by old glass and heavy frames. Inside, the fire settles inward, with an occasional low crack from the larch Herr Baumann laid on at dusk. Somewhere deeper in the lodge, there comes the faintest touch of crockery. One piece set against another, and then no more. After a while, a corridor footstep passes, dulled by carpet and distance, too far away to disturb the shape of the room. The comfort is not silence, but muffled sound. A building old enough to soften whatever moves through it. A reading room set a little apart. You shift the mug closer and lift it with both hands. The bell-shaped ceramic is no longer hot enough to startle the fingers. It gives a steadier warmth now, one that sinks into the pads of your palms and the base of your thumbs. The cream has thinned to a pale ring along the inside. Cinnamon still rises when the steam reaches your face, though the steam itself is slighter than before. You take a sip and taste the darker cocoa beneath the sweetness. Then set the mug back on its silver tray with care. Porcelain meeting metal with a softened tick. You remember, not sharply, but with bodily clarity, what the air felt like outside before you came in. That dry alpine cold against the bridge of the nose. The sting where dampness in a scarf begins to freeze. The firmness of ski boots and the hard grip of buckles over the instep. The memory only makes the room feel warmer. On the ribbed Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand, the pair of Solomon ski boots are still where you left them, unclasped and at rest, giving off the last of the mountain by inches. You do not need to look toward them to know it. Their absence from your feet is enough. The blanket settles more heavily over one shin as you ease your leg a fraction deeper into the chair. The striped wool, ox blood, and cream has grown warmer than it was when first laid across your knees. Earlier, heat had to travel into the cool places still kept in the bones and tendons after skiing. Now it has made its way through. Your knees are no longer only covered. They are warmed through, and the difference changes how you sit. Less braced, more given over. You find yourself studying the leaded pattern of the windows more than the landscape beyond. The old lines divide the storm into smaller pieces, each pane its own weather. The view has nearly disappeared. If there are lights farther down the slope or across the valley, they appear only as softened blurs, then vanish again behind the flurries. It is enough to know the snow is continuing. Behind the grate, an ember gives way and settles with a faint inward sigh. A brief glow brightens the stone nearest the hearth, then lowers again. You do not turn fully toward it. The fire is part of the room's measure now, as constant as the chair arms under your forearms. You feel its work most clearly at your shins and across the side of your face nearest the hearth. The farther side of your face keeps that trace of the window's coolness. Another distant sound reaches you from somewhere below. Perhaps a cupboard door closing in the service rooms. Perhaps a tray being lifted. It arrives worn smooth by floors, corridors, rugs, and walls. Then comes the low, almost felt hush again, with snow beyond the panes and the occasional dry touch of a page edge under your thumb. The old hardback remains open where you left it. The paper smell rises when you tip it slightly. Dust, vanilla, dry winter air, and mixes with cocoa and smoke. The page before you catches enough light to stay legible, but your eyes keep returning to the windows, to the changing density of the flurries. Reading can pause here without being interrupted. The book does not mind. It rests in your lap, weight evenly spread from one knee to the other, as settled as the mug on its tray. The windows darken by another shade, almost too slight to mark. You notice it only because the reflection inside grows a little stronger. The fire's low amber shape appears more plainly now in the glass, and with it, a softened suggestion of the chair back, the blanket's pale stripe, the angle of your sleeve. Outside remains visible, but only just. Snow and reflection begin to share the panes. That sharing makes the room feel deeper, not smaller. Outdoors has not disappeared. It has simply ceased to offer detail. The mountain is there. The slopes are there. The Engadin is there under the weather. But none of it asks to be distinguished tonight. the storm has done the simplifying for you. You draw one finger lightly along the margin of the open page, then let your hand come back to rest on the blanket. The wool catches for an instant against your knuckles. Beneath it, your knees are heavy and loose. Your shoulders have long since dropped. Even the small muscles around your eyes seem to loosen as you look from page to pane, from pane to the low reflection of fire. Beyond the glass, flakes pass in wavering layers, but they no longer seem to belong to any place you might enter tonight. They are only motion now. You sit and watch until watching itself grows softer, until the windows are no longer something apart from the chair and the blanket and the heat at your shins, but simply one more surface on which the evening continues to show itself. Outside, snow. Inside, the old room and its fire. By the time your gaze eases back toward the page, the room feels safer still, for how little the storm can now become. Chapter 9. The room's quiet fragrance. You sit a while longer with your eyes turned toward the darkened panes, and then even that small outward attention begins to loosen. The drop on the glass has gone lower than you can follow without effort. The snow beyond it has blurred into a pale, moving grain. Your gaze comes back by itself, not to any one object in particular, but to the warmer side of the room again, to the fire low in the grate, to the book open in your lap, to the rounded shape of the mug on the side table, and to the air between all these things. It is the air you begin to notice most. Not because anything changes sharply. Nothing does. The room remains as it has been. Walnut shelves dark against the walls. The ladder rails catching a little firelight. The green leather under your forearms, polished by use and heat, but your attention has become less interested in edges. It drifts instead to what arrives with each breath and leaves again with each breath. Smoke, wax, wool, paper, cocoa, drawn in, released, drawn in again. The first thing is the larch. Resinous larch smoke still threads out from the hearth, though the fire has settled lower now, burning inward rather than upward. The scent is drier than pine, less sweet than fir, with that faint resin note that lingers there a moment before softening. The resin catches at the back of your nose for a moment. A little smoke, a little warm mineral smell from the stone. The remains of cold being worked out of the logs, grain by grain. You breathe in through your nose and let the breath stay a moment before it goes. Not a deep, deliberate breath, just the kind that comes when your shoulders have already dropped and your chest no longer feels the need to do anything but rise and fall. The old hardback stays open in your lap, one thumb resting between the pages without pressure. You have not looked at the line before you for several moments. You stop reading and just breathe. Somewhere behind the paneling, a radiator gives a small tick. It is the sort of sound that would pass unnoticed in daylight. Now it arrives distinctly. A tiny metal adjustment as heat moves through old pipes. After it, the room seems to wait a little. And in that waiting, your breathing falls further out of any old briskness and into something slower. In, and the room comes nearer through scent. Out, and your weight goes further into the chair. The leather at your shoulder blades has warmed fully now. Under the blanket, your knees are no longer cool at the center. Even your feet, deep in wool socks, seem to have forgotten the shape of the boots left on the Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand. Then beeswax. It lives lower in the room, closer to the paneling and shelves, almost beneath the smoke. You catch it when you angle your head slightly, or when the fire shifts and heat moves across the wood. Beeswax has its own calm density, a polished smell, golden without being sweet. It belongs to the dark walnut and the old rails and the side tables with their rubbed corners. More than that, it brings with it the feeling of old care so quickly and completely that thought scarcely has to name it. Something in you eases further at that recognition. The chest loosens. The jaw unclenches without announcement. You do not need to think of hands and cloths and winter evenings much like this one in order to feel the settledness of them. Your eyes drift toward the shelves without leaving the chair. Beeswax and walnut live there together. If you inhaled with the book closed and the mug untouched, you would still know what room you were in by that alone. Old paneling has its own stored winter smell, dry and faintly sweet, especially after the day's heat has had hours to draw it out. You think, without following the thought very far, that this is what evening in such a room becomes after enough years. Not any single fire, not any single storm outside, but a layering of care into the wood itself. Under that, and nearer to you, there is wool, not the clean, dry wool of a folded blanket taken from a cupboard, though some of that remains. This is the warmer smell of wool after weather. Your socks drying by degrees. The lodge's thick wool blanket striped in ox blood and cream, releasing a little stored heat each time you shift beneath it. The cuffs of your sleeves, the place where melted snow had once touched and has now nearly vanished. Damp wool drying has a blunt, familiar smell. Mountain air caught in fibers. A trace of outside still present, but changed. Not cold anymore. Not wet exactly. Simply becoming indoor cloth again. You draw one corner of the blanket a little higher over your shin. The wool drags with a dry, dense friction across your trousers, and then comes to rest. Ox blood and cream, warmed all through by now. The smell of it rises a touch stronger when it moves, and with it comes that nearly finished trace of outdoor air trapped in the fibers earlier in the evening. It is pleasant that some part of the mountain remains in the room this way, not as effort, not as cold, only as a faint mineral cleanness mingled with wool. Your body answers it by settling more heavily rather than more alertly. Only a trace of outside remains in the cloth. there is nothing left to brace against. Another radiator tick. Before, the scents arrive as separate notes. After, they begin to gather. Larch at the back of the nose. Beeswax low in the wood. Wool close to the skin. Your breathing has fallen into time with your noticing. Not counted, not guided. Simply slower, because there is nothing to resist anymore. A page shifts under your thumb, not turning, only easing against the next with a dry paper murmur. The smell of the book lifts. Dust, vanilla, dry winter air, and joins the others at once. Even the paper smell keeps you from reading. And then, whenever your hand reaches for it, cocoa. The bell-shaped ceramic mug still sits on its small silver tray beside you. The cream has thinned to a pale ring near the rim, and the cinnamon is no longer a dusting so much as part of the drink itself. When you lift the mug, the heat is gentler than before, but still full enough to gather both hands around it. The curve of the ceramic warms the heel of each palm. Steam rises again, not in a rush, but in a narrow, wavering thread. And as it reaches your face, the cocoa comes with it. Dark, faintly bitter, rounded by milk, with that last trace of cinnamon lifting just above it. For a moment, the steam touches your upper lip and the tip of your nose. That brief warmth is so slight, you might miss it if you were less settled. But now you feel it clearly. A small passing veil of heat over skin that had once been stung bright by the snow. Something in the chest answers too. Not only when you swallow, but at the first arrival of the smell itself, as if the body recognizes comfort a second before the mouth does. Then the steam thins into the dim room and is gone, except that the cocoa remains, softer now, close to your mouth as you take a sip. The hot chocolate is no longer hot enough to surprise you. It moves across the tongue slowly, thickened just enough to feel substantial, and then down into the chest with an inward warmth that spreads less dramatically than before, and more completely. A quiet loosening follows it. The sternum seems to ease. The breath that comes after the swallow is fuller without being deeper, and slower without being willed. You swallow. The mug lowers again. The tray gives the faintest touch of ceramic, returned to silver. You settle back. The fire gives another low breath through the grate. Again, the larch comes forward. Resin, smoke, a little sweetness from sap released by heat, then quickly tempered by stone and ash. If you were trying to describe it exactly, you would only make it thinner than it is. You lift the mug once more. Steam rises. Cocoa, cinnamon, warm ceramic against your fingers. The steam reaches your face and fades. It is remarkable how much comfort can be contained in something so brief. One small cloud of warmth, one swallow, one return of the mug to the tray. The silver catches a low stripe of firelight, and then loses it again as the flames settle. Outside remains outside. You know the snow continues at the windows, looking toward the Engadin snow, but you do not need to look to confirm it. The room tells you enough. The drying wool tells you enough. The faint coolness still held at the glass tells you enough. The warmth gathered under the blanket tells you enough. Another radiator tick. Another inward settling of embers. Another breath. You lose the thread of the page. That is the way of the mind now. It starts a sentence and grows less interested in finishing. Scent takes over where language leaves off. Smoke, wax, wool, cocoa, the same notes returning, each one a little altered by warmth, by angle, by distance. You do not need novelty from them. Their repetition is the comfort. Even the cream left at the rim of the mug has its own faint dairy sweetness when the cup comes near. Even the leather of the chair, warmed by your forearms and by the hearth, gives off that muted, seasoned smell of old hide and polish. If you lean your head a fraction to one side, you let your head rest more fully against the chair back. At the base of your throat, the last sip of cocoa leaves a residual heat. Lower down, it has already disappeared into the body's general comfort. Your hands rest more loosely now. One remains curved around the mug handle for a moment longer than necessary, enjoying the shape of it, then slips back beneath the fold of the blanket. The other stays on the lower margin of the open page, feeling the slight roughness of deckled paper against the side of the thumb. The room's fragrance has become less like separate strands and more like one atmosphere with changing emphasis. At one breath, the smoke is clearest. At the next, beeswax, then wool, then cocoa, then the pale paper scent from the old hardback. None of it asks to be named, and after a while, even naming it inwardly begins to feel like more effort than is needed. The fire has burned down enough that the brightest light now comes from the bed of embers rather than the flames. This changes the smell too, subtly. Less sharp smoke, more warm wood and ash. The larch is still there, but lower, as though it has gone from branch to hardwood. You notice the difference not because you are studying it, but because your body has become so still that small changes register clearly. A shoulder settling 1 inch deeper into leather, toes uncurling under wool, the blanket growing heavier as your legs stop adjusting beneath it. You breathe in resinous larch smoke. You breathe out beeswax on wood paneling. You breathe in again damp wool drying. And then, when you lift the mug once more, and the steam reaches your face before dissolving into the room, cocoa rising in a soft wave. The silver tray gives the faintest answering touch when the mug returns to it. Then, stillness again. The blanket remains over your knees, warm now all the way through. The book stays open, though you have not read the same line for some time. Somewhere in the grate, a coal settles with a soft, inward sound. The radiator, after its earlier ticks, is silent for the moment, and the air continues its work with no need of attention from you beyond breathing it. You sit within that mingled fragrance until it becomes difficult to tell where one comfort ends and another begins. The larch smoke has found the wool. The wool has taken a little of the cocoa. The beeswax has warmed under the same heat that warms your hands. The pages in your lap keep their dry vanilla note beneath everything else, steady and faint. Each breath gathers the room and lets it go again, gathers it and lets it go, while the fire lowers by degrees and the evening deepens without announcement. The book remains open, but reading has fallen away from the center of the hour. You notice the room most through breathing. Chapter 10. Pages, Embers, and soft leather. You sit with the book open in your lap, and after a while reading, resting, and listening blur together. The page becomes part of the weight in your lap, the dry touch beneath your thumb, the low hush of the fire making itself known through your skin before your ears. The old hardback has settled into the curve it prefers, cloth-bound spine easing where many winter evenings have opened it before. The deckled edges rest against the blanket in a pale, uneven stack. Firelight catches the lower margins and leaves the upper lines in a dimmer gold, so that your eyes move over the print without any need to hurry. A sentence receives you, then another, then perhaps the same one again, because somewhere between the first half of a page and the second, your attention has drifted toward the warmth in your knees, or the faint settling sound in the grate. The book stays where it is. Your hands stay where they are. The room keeps its own measure. One hand lies along the outer board, feeling the worn cloth under your fingers, the slight rounding at the corners where use has softened them. The other rests nearer the gutter of the page, thumb tucked lightly at the margin, ready to turn when turning comes. But a long while can pass before it does. You look down. You read a little. You listen a little. You breathe in the paper smell of dust, vanilla, and dry winter air. And beneath it, the room's older scents remain. Resinous larch smoke, beeswax on wood paneling, damp wool slowly drying, and cocoa rising now and then from the mug when a little heat still lifts from its surface. You finish the line. Or perhaps you do not. Your eyes rest on the shape of the paragraph for a moment, and the words loosen into pattern rather than meaning. Little dark strokes laid down in rows, not reading for the next event, not reading to arrive anywhere. Just the company of a page open under your hand. Just the familiar proof that there is more text ahead whenever you want it, and no need at all to reach it quickly. You turn the page at last. The paper makes that dry, sliding sound you have already come to know tonight. A hush of fibers passing one another. The lifted leaf brushes the next and settles. Your fingertip follows the edge down without pressing hard, just enough to ease the page flat. The deckled margin catches a little against your skin. Then the new page lies open. You read 2 lines. Then your gaze slips to the fire. Between the bars of the grate, the embers have sunk lower beneath the split log Herr Baumann laid on at dusk. Their color has deepened, with brighter seams opening and dimming under a light fold of ash. One edge of char loosens and curls in on itself. You watch it for a moment, not because it is important, only because your eyes have gone there and are content to remain. The green leather wingback chair set near the stone hearth answers your stillness with its own. When you settle one fraction deeper, the leather gives a low, worked sound, and then is done. Earlier, there had been that first coolness in the arms, a brief, smooth chill under your forearms before your own heat changed it. Now the leather has warmed to you, neither cool nor warm enough to call attention to itself, only there, supporting your elbows, your shoulders, the back of your head when it tips a little farther into the wing. The blanket over your knees has become part of your posture. Its ox blood and cream stripes no longer feel like something placed over you, but something already included in the arrangement. Chair, blanket, book, hands, fire. If you move your feet beneath it, the wool drags faintly over your socks. If you shift one knee, the folds resettle with a dense, brushed sound. Then they are still again. The mug on the side table is cooler now, but not cold. When you lift it, the bell-shaped ceramic still gives back a stored warmth to your palms. The little crown of cream has long since thinned to a faint ring, and the cinnamon has darkened into the surface. The chocolate is thicker now than it was earlier, slower against the inside of the cup. You take a sip and feel that last pocket of heat reach your tongue, your throat, your chest. Then you set the mug down again on the small silver tray, with care enough that there is only the briefest touch of ceramic to metal. Your hand returns to the book, almost by itself. The windows somewhere to your left, their panes dim with flurries beyond the glass, though you do not need to look at them now to remember the snow. It is present in other ways, in the last of the cold still leaving your calves, in the drying seams of the pair of Solomon ski boots left on a ribbed Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand, in the faint mineral memory carried in with your clothes, and nearly gone now under wool, smoke, and cocoa. You read another little while. This time, the words hold together a bit longer. A phrase pleases you, though if you were asked for it a minute later, you might not be able to repeat it exactly. It is enough that it passes through, enough that your eyes continue downward, enough that one page follows another with no demand attached. In the fire, one ember collapses inward with a tiny sigh of sparks hidden behind the grate. You hear it more than see it, that brief inward settling, a sift of brightness dropping through ash. When you glance over, the change is already done. A red pocket has opened lower down where the ember fell, and above it, the charred edge has altered shape by almost nothing. A trace of fresh larch reaches the air, resin warmed again from within the log. For a moment, you notice the grate more clearly. The bars stand black and exact. The ash beneath shows ridges and hollows. Heat touches your shins in a clearer band. Even the little current rising past your cheek seems newly distinct. Then, even that fades back into the room's mingled fragrance. The chair gives another muted creak when you let your shoulders drop the smallest further distance. That is all. You do not need to correct your posture after. The leather receives the new angle and keeps it. The wing at one side touches near your temple. The warmth from the hearth reaches the fronts of your legs, while the back of the chair keeps a steadier, less vivid heat where your coat has long since been set aside and your sweater has taken on the room's temperature. Your lower back rests fully now, no reserve left in it. Even your hands have lost the last briskness they carried from outside. The knuckles are loose. The fingers uncurl easily from the mug, from the page, from one another. You return to the page, though return is hardly the word. Your attention moves between these things without leaving any of them entirely. The print remains before you. The fire remains at your right. The mug remains within reach. The blanket remains over your knees. The chair remains around you. None asks to come first. A sentence trails off because your eyes close for just a blink longer than reading requires. When they open, the page is still there, patient in its plain way, neither gained nor lost. You find your place by the shape of the paragraph, by the small black notch where a quotation begins, by the memory of where your thumb rested near the edge. Then you read on. If reading is the word for this drifting contact with lines and margins, this being accompanied by a book more than actively following it, the firelight has lowered by a shade. Not darker exactly, more concentrated. The stone at the hearth reflects less brightness now, and the walnut shelves beyond the chair have withdrawn farther into brown shadow. Ladder rails catch a thinner line of glow. The newspapers Herr Baumann straightened earlier remain untouched where he left them, their pale folds scarcely visible from here. Another page could be turned now. You feel the slight thickness gathering under the fingers of your left hand, the promise of pages already read accumulating there. But you do not turn it yet. Instead, you rest on the final lines before the break, then on the white space beneath them. The paper itself becomes interesting for a moment. Not only what it says, but what it is. Dry, faintly rough, cooler at the top margin where your hand has not warmed it, softer at the lower corner from years of use. The chimney draws once more, a low passage of air above the hearth. You take one more sip from the mug. Less steam rises now, but enough to touch your face before disappearing into the dimness. The cinnamon is fainter. The chocolate has become almost velvety on the tongue, cooler than before, still rich. You set it back on the tray. Your fingers remain curved for a moment, as if the cup were still there, remembering its shape. The warmth left in your palms is slight, but specific. A small, stored echo of ceramic and sweetness. Then they settle again on the book. The page turns. The new leaf falls open. Your knees remain warm under the wool. Your shoulders rest in the leather. The embers draw inward by grains and small collapses. The print receives your eyes, releases them, receives them again. And in that slow exchange, the last firm edges of the evening soften a little more, while the stairwell beyond the room stays dark and still, and somewhere in the timber above, wood gives a small settling tick. Chapter 11. The lodge exhales around you. Your eyes rest on the page, then drift above it without effort. The line you have just read remains somewhere in reach, but not sharply. Firelight lies across the lower edge of the paper, and beyond that small pool of brightness, the room has gone another shade dimmer. The walnut shelves no longer stand out one by one. They have become a dark, even presence around the walls, their ladder rails catching only the occasional thread of glow. The book stays open in your lap. Your thumb rests between two deckled pages. The cloth-bound spine presses lightly through the blanket to your knees. From somewhere deep in the lodge, a door closes. It is not loud. It arrives through distance and timber and corridor carpet as a rounded thud, softened before it reaches you. The sound reaches you softened by distance. Elsewhere, a room received someone. A hand let go of a knob. Life continued beyond your firelit corner and asked nothing of you. The sound passes into the reading room the way a pulse passes through a resting body, noticeable only because everything near you has become so still. Then it is gone. The quiet returns over it at once, not as an event, only as the ordinary state of the room settling back into place. You do not lift your head. You only notice, with a kind of inward ease, that the building is full of other lives moving farther off. Someone has gone into a room and shut the door behind them. Somewhere, a latch has met its plate. Somewhere, a hand has released a knob and walked on. You remain where you are, with the blanket over your knees and the old hardback open in your lap. And the knowledge of those other motions reaches you with the quiet pleasure of being left entirely alone. The chair gives under you in the same familiar way it has all evening. The leather warmed now through its arms and back. Earlier, there had been a little coolness where your forearms first touched it. That has long since gone. The green leather wing-back chair set near the stone hearth has taken your weight so completely that you feel less as though you are sitting in it than settled into a shape already made. Your shoulders rest low. The muscles along your back no longer make the small, unnecessary corrections they once did when you were still half arrived, still carrying slope and wind and descent in your frame. Near the side table, the bell-shaped ceramic mug keeps a little of its heat. When you lift it, the silver tray gives the faintest answering tick against the wood. No more than a touch. The crown of cream has thinned to a pale ring high on the inside curve, and the cinnamon has sunk into the dark chocolate below. Steam no longer rises in full curls, only in a brief breath that warms your upper lip before vanishing into the room's air. You take a small sip. It is not hot now, but deep and soothing, with that same cocoa richness that has been part of the room all evening, mingling with resinous larch smoke, beeswax on wood paneling, and damp wool drying by degrees. When you set the mug back down, another sound reaches you from far off. Crockery, perhaps from a pantry or a service station down the corridor. One piece touching another with a delicate clink. It comes and goes so quickly that you almost wonder if it was only memory carried by the building. But then you hear the faintest follow of it, a second, lighter contact, and know that somewhere beyond these paneled walls, someone is stacking cups, or setting a saucer straight, or preparing the last things before the night deepens further. It pleases you, this, not because you want to see it, and not because you want company in the room. You do not. The pleasure is simpler and deeper than that. The lodge is still awake. A cupboard opens. A cup meets a shelf. A corridor receives one passing step. None of it comes near enough to disturb the heat gathered around your shins, or the open weight of the book across your lap. The newspapers Herr Baumann straightened earlier remain untouched on their table. Even from here, you can feel the order of them. Their edges are aligned. Their folded centers sit square. The room carries that slight increase of neatness he left behind, the kind that is visible less in any one object than in the absence of small disarray. One split log of larch he placed on the fire after dusk has burned down into the bed of embers, but its fragrance still threads the air. You can tell where it entered the evening. The smoke has that clean, resinous note that sharpens the cocoa for a moment, each time you breathe in more deeply. His earlier care still shows. The papers are squared. The fire was laid well. You have been allowed to remain. You turn a page. The paper makes its dry sound, thin and clear in the hush. Then your hand comes to rest again on the right margin, fingers loose, not yet ready for another page. You read only a little at a time. A sentence reaches you. Another drifts by with only half its shape. Your eyes go to the print, because the print is there, and because the old hardback in your lap has the exact weight and patience the evening requires. Dust, vanilla, dry winter air. The faint paper scent rises when the pages shift, then settles. At the windows, the Engadin has disappeared almost entirely into weather and dark. The panes hold only a blurred pallor where snow still moves beyond them, and the weaker reflection of firelight from within. Along the edges, the condensation has gathered into a lacework that catches what little light remains. One thread has lengthened enough to slip lower on the glass. You do not watch it all the way down. It is enough to know that it is moving, slowly, while you are not. a muffled footstep passes in the corridor outside. Not hurried, not hesitant either. Just one of those measured indoor steps made by someone who knows the carpets, the turns, the hour. Then another, farther away already. The sound is softened by walls and runner and distance, until it becomes less a footstep than a change in pressure. A brief reminder that the long body of the hotel extends beyond this room in many directions. Stairs descending, rooms closing their curtains, lamps switched low. Taps run for a moment and turned off again. Your own room is somewhere above or along one of those corridors. Bed turned down, curtains drawn. But the thought arrives without pull. It is simply another fact held elsewhere in the building, no more urgent than the stacked crockery or the closed door. For now, your place remains here by the hearth, with your calves still carrying the pleasant after-ache of skiing under the wool blanket striped in oxblood and cream, and your hands alternating between page and mug. You shift one heel beneath the blanket. The wool drags over your sock with a dense, familiar friction. Heat has finally reached all the places that were slowest to thaw. The fronts of the shins, the ankles, that cooler band just above the boot line where the mountain had stayed longest in you. The boots left on a ribbed Coir Mat by the brass umbrella stand are only visible if you glance toward the door, but you can picture them without looking. The buckles unclasped, the shape of them softened now, liners breathing out the last trapped cold into the room. By this point, they have become part of the same order as everything else. Not gear in use, only objects at rest. From another room, somewhere off to the side and down, there comes a brief murmur of laughter. It is subdued at once, as if the people there are already speaking in evening voices, aware of walls, aware of the hour. You cannot make out who or how many, or what was said before it. Only that low rise of human warmth, then its quick taper. For a moment, it touches you with a small tenderness. Others, too, have come in from the snow, have eaten, have warmed their hands around cups, have found the day loosening from them in company before lowering their voices as the night settles over the roof and windows. The laughter fades without drawing you toward it. It leaves behind not curiosity, but comfort, a sense of shared shelter held at exactly the right distance. You breathe in, and the room enters you in layers again. Larch smoke first, then beeswax, then the wool smell from blanket and socks and drying cuffs, then the darker sweetness of cocoa from the mug. When you exhale, your chest loosens a little more against the back of the chair. The fire has burned low enough now that its sounds come at longer intervals. A tiny settling in the grate, a muted crack from deeper in the wood, a soft chimney draw above. Between these sounds, there is space enough for the building itself to be heard in fragments. Not creaks exactly, more the minute adjustments of an old place in winter, timber easing, heat moving through pipes, a distant radiator giving one neat tick, and then no more. You let your eyes leave the page again. Across from you, the shelves rise into shadow. The brass rails on the library ladders catch a dull gleam. The stone around the hearth keeps a low, stored warmth of its own, less vivid than flame, steadier. On the table beside the newspapers, a lamp burns under its shade with that same moderated glow it has offered all evening, enough to shape the room without brightening it. Herr Baumann's earlier passage remains visible in these arrangements, in the squared stack of papers, in the fresh log now reduced to ember, in the sense that all movable things have been left exactly where they should be. The room still bears the touch of having been quietly cared for, and because of that, your own stillness in it feels less accidental than received. Another door closes, somewhere farther away than the first. This one is softer still, almost absorbed before it arrives. Then, as before, the quiet folds back over it. You notice how little your body reacts now. No lifting of the head, no pause in the hand. The sound enters the evening and becomes part of it, like one more grain settling into place. To be left undisturbed can include this. Not perfect stillness, but distance kept. Life elsewhere in the lodge continues in lowered tones, while your corner by the fire remains intact. The page before you has blurred slightly. You blink, and the print sharpens, then softens at the edges once more. It no longer matters whether you finish this chapter of the book tonight, or whether your thumb stays where it is for several minutes before moving. The book is undemanding company. Its weight is enough. Its dry paper scent is enough. The knowledge that another page can be turned when you choose is enough. You take one more sip from the mug, less now than before. The chocolate has cooled to the exact point where it seems to spread its warmth inward rather than announce itself on the tongue. You set the mug down carefully on the silver tray. The contact is small and exact. Far beyond the reading room, a final faint clink of crockery. Then a corridor footstep. Then nothing near enough to name for a while. The lodge settles around you floor by floor, room by room, with no need to witness it directly. You feel it only in these softened transmissions. A door somewhere deep in the building, a laugh reduced by distance, a cup set down, a measured step passing and receding. So you remain with the page open, the blanket warm over your knees, the leather shaped to your back, and the embers drawing inward in the grate. Outside, snow continues against the darkened windows. Inside, the air keeps its mingled traces of smoke and beeswax and wool and cocoa. And between one far-off sound and the next, there is more than enough room to rest your eyes on the print. Let them drift, and listen as the old hotel settles further into night, holding you within its larger sleeping body. Chapter 12. One More Breath by the Fire. The page is still open where your thumb has kept its place, though you are no longer reading in any steady way. The print blurs, then sharpens, then blurs again, your eyes learning a slower rhythm than the one they used for the slopes, for the lift line, for the bright distances of afternoon snow. The old hardback rests in your lap with its familiar weight, cloth-bound spine bowed by many winters, deckled pages uneven beneath your fingertips. When you shift your hand by hardly more than a breath, the paper gives off that dry scent again, dust, vanilla, and the faint, clean note of winter air carried in and long since warmed. The chair has finished warming beneath you. Earlier, the leather arms had met your forearms with a trace of coolness that disappeared by degrees. Now they feel almost level with your own skin, neither cool nor warm enough to name, only settled. The green leather has taken the shape of your shoulders and back for the evening, and the cushion beneath you no longer announces itself each time you move. It simply receives the little changes, the inching down of your hips, the soft release at the base of your spine, the way your head comes to rest more fully against the wingback. Your hands have grown heavier without your noticing when. The book dips a little and is caught again. Your focus softens at the edges, returns for a line or two, softens once more. You do not need to sit up to remain awake. You don't need to stay sharply awake. Across your knees, the thick wool blanket keeps its weight. Oxblood and cream. The stripes are dim now in the lowered firelight, their color less distinct than before, though your hands still know the difference between the smoother, worn bands and the denser ridges where the wool rises slightly. Heat has reached all the way through your shins at last. The last coolness at your ankles is gone. Under the blanket, your calves are no longer those of a skier returning from the mountain. They are simply warm calves, heavy and at rest, stretched toward the hearth. Beside you, on the side table, the bell-shaped ceramic mug has gone from hot to warm to almost not warm at all. When you lift it, both hands still fit around its curve by habit, though now the heat is mild, gathered low in the remaining chocolate. The crown of cream has long since dissolved into a pale ring, and the trace of cinnamon has sunk into the dark surface. Even so, when you tip the mug and take one small sip, cocoa rises at once, faint but still rich. It touches the roof of your mouth, leaves a little sweetness there, and then is gone. The silver tray beneath the mug gives the smallest contact note when you set it down again. Not a tap so much as a thin settling of metal against wood. After that, your hands feel heavier still. One returns to the book. The other rests for a while on top of the blanket, palm down, fingers curved where the wool slopes over your knee. Firelight brushes the backs of your knuckles, and then recedes as the embers shift inward. The room has softened at the edges. The walnut shelves are still there, their ladder rails catching one line of red gold now and then. The newspapers Herr Baumann straightened at dusk remain untouched in their place. The panes beyond the chair still face the Engadin, but the view has narrowed to weather and reflection, to flurries crossing a dark field, and the low glow of the hearth ghosted in the glass. You look up from the page without deciding to. On the windows, condensation has gathered into a fine lace at the edges, and one thread of moisture has made its way lower since you last noticed it. Beyond that, snow continues, not thickly, not urgently, only steadily enough to keep the outside world blurred and distant. The glass has become its own surface now, with the room faintly mirrored in it, a suggestion of shelves, one softer flame color, the dark outline of the chair. When your gaze lowers again, it does not go straight back to the line where you left off. It comes first to your own lap, to the old hardback open over the blanket, to the crease in the cloth-bound spine, to the slight shadow between two pages where your thumb still rests. The page could be turned or left where it is. The difference has become very small. Reading has thinned into looking, and looking has thinned into resting with the book open. The paper smell rises now and then. When the warm air from the fire shifts, you do turn the page at last, though so slowly that the movement seems to happen mostly in the fingers. The paper lifts with a dry little rasp and falls over with less sound than your sleeve makes against the blanket. Then the new page lies open, and for a few moments, the print appears clear again. A sentence receives your attention, then another. Then the line breaks apart into black strokes on cream paper, and your eyes settle on the margin instead, where the fire has laid a dim amber edge. In the grate, one ember folds inward. You do not see sparks leap. You hear only that tiny inward sigh from behind the iron, followed by a small rearranging among the coals. The split log Herr Baumann added hours ago has burned down into its red heart. A seam of orange appears briefly, then dulls. The stone around the hearth keeps giving back its stored heat. You can feel it on the fronts of your shins through the blanket, and lower, on your wool socks, where the day's cold had once clung longest. The fire is still warming out the last of the day's cold. Your shoulders drop another fraction, without your noticing the moment they do. The hand on the blanket slides nearer the chair arm. Your jaw loosens. Breath enters through your nose, carrying resinous larch smoke, beeswax from the paneling, the last traces of damp wool drying somewhere in the room, and cocoa that still clings to the air above the mug. Far off in the lodge, a floorboard answers someone's late step. Then all is still again. The sound is so muted by distance and carpeting that it reaches you mostly as a reminder of the building's size, of corridors and stair turns, and other rooms behind closed doors. Then that, too, passes. Fire, page, wool, window, the words in your lap, the warmth at your knees, the mild weight of your hands. You shift the blanket an inch higher, more from instinct than need. Its edge drags softly over your trousers and settles just below your kneecaps. Under it, your legs feel dense and comfortably far away, as if the chair, the blanket, and the hearth have together taken over the work of supporting them. Your legs feel used and fully at rest. The book dips a little as your wrists relax. You let it. The spine presses more fully into the blanket, and the pages open wider of their own accord. The book falls open at the middle. The deckled edges brush your thumb with their unevenness. One corner of a page touches the heel of your hand. These tiny pressures become enough to notice for a long while. At some point, you realize the firelight has lowered by a shade, not gone down sharply, not dimmed in any troubling sense. It has simply drawn closer to the grate, and in doing so, has made the room gentler. The shelves recede. The ceiling disappears into brown shadow above the paneling. The windows become darker mirrors, with snow moving faintly across them. Even the silver tray has lost its earlier gleam, and now gives back only a muted crescent from the hearth. You read one line twice, without minding that it does not stay. Then you stop reading, and remain with the page open. Your thumb shifts from between the leaves to the lower margin. The paper is cool compared to the heat gathered in your hands. When you rest your palm there, the page bows slightly and then stills. Breath out, breath in. The hotel settles around you. Outside, snow goes on crossing the panes toward the unseen valley. Inside, the blanket keeps its broad weight over your knees. The mug cools by degrees on the tray. The embers contract and brighten and dull again. The chair remains close around your shoulders, its leather giving one almost inaudible creak when you sink a fraction deeper. If you choose, you can lift the mug once more and find only the last cool sweetness at the bottom. If you choose, you can turn another page and let the dry paper pass beneath your fingers. If you choose, you can leave the book where it rests, open and companionable in your lap, and watch the low amber light along the margin until even that softens. So you stay as you are for another breath, and then another. Warmth in the knees, heaviness in the hands, the faint paper scent rising when the page shifts by a hair, snow at the windows, reduced to motion and dimness. Beyond the glass, the night goes on. Here, there is still one more breath by the fire, and after that, room enough for another.